Hey guys, so in this video I'm going to show you how to avoid cakey and overdone makeup. So before we get into this, I'm just going to go ahead and say right off the bat that this is in no way to offend anyone because I used to look like this. So the first thing I'm going to mention is I would avoid using a very thick and cheap primer. What I've noticed is that it doesn't sit very well on the skin. It doesn't create a very nice layer. I prefer to use a moisturizer and let that sit into the skin for a couple minutes, and that creates a much more flawless base, especially if you have dry skin. I would also avoid using a brush and a full coverage foundation. Using a brush creates creases and it cakes up the foundation very easily, and a full coverage foundation is the type of foundation that's definitely going to cake very easily because it is so full coverage. It is going to crease and cake up. So to avoid that, what I would suggest is using a beauty blender for more of a flawless application, and just use a lighter coverage foundation. What that's going to do is that's going to create a more smoother base for the rest of your makeup. And if you have any areas that you need to cover up with, instead of using like any type of concealer, just go ahead and use that full coverage foundation and just take a tiny little bit on your hand and just take a beauty blender and put those over the places that you need a little bit more coverage, and that's going to create more of a full coverage flawless look without caking up and creasing so much. On this side you can see it's very creased and caked up and just does not look good at all. And on the side it's a much more of a flawless application. I for one have never been the best at doing my brows, but what I can say is that I have seen a lot of people and myself start off with a block at the very beginning of the brow and go in with a very dark color and just go ham on that. And that's just going to create a very messy brow, and it's just not going to look good for anyone. So what I've learned works for me is that I'll just take that same color but go very lightly with my application and just fill in the blanks where there's any patches. I'll just go ahead and fill that in, and I will create my wing because I usually shave off the ends of my brows because they grow in very weird. But yeah, just go ahead with a lighter application and it looks a lot more natural. If you have any mistakes that you need to clean up, just take some concealer and go over the mistakes so you can clean it up and have a much more flawless brow. And if you want, you can also add some concealer at the very top, and you can either use a finger or a beauty blender or whatever you choose to use, and you can just blend that out. And you can also go over the beginning of the brow to create that more gradient ombre effect. So I myself used to be a victim of this. I would take the heaviest concealer I could find and just cake it on. And what that's going to do is, of course, it's going to cake your makeup, and it's just going to leave it very patchy, and you're just going to spread all that makeup around, and it's just going to look very messy. If you have really visible pores, it's also going to make those pop out even more, which is definitely not good at all, especially if you're trying to conceal them with concealer. Just adding more concealer is just going to make it pop out even more. So instead what I do is I just take a little bit of concealer on my beauty blender and I just go in with a very light hand. That's going to create the coverage that you want and that you need, but it's not going to crease up and cake. I used to do this a lot. I would take the darkest contour shade I could find, and I would take a brush and I would put it way too low, and then I would put it under my jaw, I would put it on my forehead, I would put it everywhere. And the problem with this is that it's going to look very muddy when you blend it out, especially if you use a brush. You don't want to use so much product because it's just going to get all over the face, and it's not going to create the effect that you're trying to go for. So then after you've made that mistake of putting way too much and you want to go back over and add more concealer, what that's going to do is that's going to cake up that foundation even more, just adding layer after layer after layer, and that's just not going to be a good look for anyone. Also with the nose contour, you don't want to bring it all the way down to the end of your nose or to the bottom of your nose, because that's just going to make your nose look even bigger. So instead what you can do is you can use a lighter contour shade, and I just use a beauty blender, and I use a lot less product, and it's going to give you the sculpted look that you want to go for, but it's not going to be muddy, and it's going to be in the exact place that you want it. Also with the nose contour, I just put it where I want it and blend it out just a little bit, but don't drag it down. So baking I tend to avoid because it just kicks up the concealer even more. Instead I just use a large fan brush, and I just brush over the powder over my face to give me a more matte look, so it's not very oily. When it comes to the eyes, when you put product on your lid, you don't want to smear it everywhere. That's not going to be a good look. And also you want to avoid just going in right with dark colors. You want to have a transition shade, because when you put dark right on top of everything, it's just going to look very, very muddy, and it's not going to be a very smooth transition, and it just doesn't look good at all. If you want to apply glitter and you have to use glue, be very, very careful. Don't be careless with this. Don't get it all over the eye. You want to get it right on the lid, and don't just go in with that glitter, because it's just going to get all over the eye. It's not going to look good. It's going to look very, very messy, and you're just going to have a ton of fallout onto the eye, and then you're going to like try to swipe it away, and it's just going to move the product that you already have, and it's just not a good look. Another thing is adding eyeliner right on top of the glitter. It's going to not be very smooth, and it's going to look pretty cracked, and it just doesn't look good in my opinion. So when I apply my base color to my lid, I just pat it onto my lid and not smear it around. When I want to go for a more dark smoky look, I just go ahead and have a lighter transition shade than the other colors that I'm going to apply, and just blend that out. And then I will go in with a darker shade and use a blending brush and just blend that out on the sides, and that way you can create a more gradient effect, and it's not just very, very heavy, and it looks very, very nice. Here I'm just highlighting underneath the brow bone in the inner corner. So after you have all of that glitter and fallout is going to be all over your lashes, then you're just going to go ahead and put mascara all over it. That's just not going to look good. It's going to be very spider-like, and it's not going to look very good. So instead, you know, you just make sure that you don't go over the top. I never go over top with my mascara because it just clumps everything together. You always want to go below the lash, and that creates a more pretty effect. So after you clump up your mascara, you're gonna go ahead and apply some false lashes on top of it. My pet peeve is when people apply lashes and then they don't trim it. They're gonna look wonky, it's not gonna look good. And then after that, you go ahead and apply mascara underneath it. It's just all gonna look very clumped up, and it's not gonna look very pretty, it's just gonna look very heavy. So if you're going to do eyeliner, please make sure that you're not doing one that's way too dark and it's sharpened. If it's not, then it's just gonna look very, very weird, and it's going to be messy all around the lip. And you also don't want to go too light with your lipstick, because that's just not going to look good at all. So what I do if I want my lips to look fuller and have that nice ombre effect, I just take a darker lipstick and I apply that, and then I go in with a lighter lipstick and I just use my finger and I will pat that onto the center, and I will just smush that out a little bit, and it's going to create that look that you want to go for. Now, I am guilty as charged when it comes to highlighter. I absolutely love highlighter, but unfortunately, there is such thing as too much. And here is a very great prime example of that. Using your finger, just using a ton of it, and just smearing it all over your cheeks, especially if you're doing it at the apples of your cheeks. It's going to pop out those pores even more. So I'll just take a fan brush and I'll brush it over my cheeks where I want the product to be. So I hope you guys learned something from this video. Please don't forget to like and subscribe to my channel. I'll see you guys next time. Bye.